UFC 301 just ended, and we had some shocking moments. We had Vitor Petrino getting submitted early in the first round in Brazil. We had Michel Pereira doing a backflip and landing what looked like an illegal knee, but still getting the win. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks, and I'm going to recap the entire UFC 301 fight card. But first, let's start with the bets. Overall, I had a very successful betting night. I only missed one single bet that I put on the board. The yellow ones you see here, those were refunded. The William Gomez bet was obviously canceled when William Gomez looked like he was going to not make it after stepping off of that scale. And then the Jose Aldo bet refunded. I will tell you why I'm so wildly furious at that result. But either way, that was an inside the distance decision, no action bet. There was a decision, so no action. That is a refund. I hit the Joanderson Brito money line. I hit the Orobay Bonfim parlay. I hit my over on the round parlay, my Caio and Michel Pereira parlay. And then obviously, as we all know, Vitor Petrino did not get it done, and that is the only bet that I missed. Thankfully, if you know me and you know how I bet, I am never overly exposed to one fighter. I never have one single fighter in more than one thing. The closest you'll ever see is what we have here, where I have Bonfim in a parlay, and then I have the over rounds in a parlay. A different person can win, and one of those bets can hit. I'm not going to lose both of those. But either way, luckily not overly exposed to Vitor Petrino. A unit for me is $100, so I am up $140. I gave you 31% return on investment. We put fewer than 5 units on the board, and we brought back just shy of 6. We also had the best possible DraftKings ownership projections on planet Earth. If you don't know what DraftKings Fantasy is, well, you build some lineups, you have some fun. It's fantasy football. You can do the same thing for fights. And one of the most important aspects of building these lineups to chase these giant payouts is knowing what other people are going to do, who they're going to have in their lineup, so you can mirror it or separate yourself away from it. And the projections are what help you do that. And we quite literally have the best projections on the planet week in and week out. If you want to unlock the bets for UFC St. Louis, if you want to unlock the DraftKings ownership projections for UFC St. Louis, you can do that right now, this minute. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top. The St. Louis picks are up already. The projections will be up right after weigh-ins. Let's go ahead and talk about this card. I saw every single fight except one. I missed the lady fight, the third fight of the night, and from what I could hear in the other room, it wasn't the most exciting fight, but the outcome was a little controversial. I did not get to see that fight. I was too busy cooking. But I did get to see all the other ones, including the Alessandro Costa fight. And my big question after that is Alessandro Costa the real deal? Because he certainly looked like it. Those early leg kicks were devastating. He absolutely destroyed Kevin Borjas' legs instantly, to the point where Kevin couldn't stand on it and collapsed. And then Alessandro Costa still didn't let up. The flying knee landed. He just looked absolutely spectacular. I picked him to win. I thought he was going to win, but I thought it was going to be the wrestling. I thought the wrestling was going to be the difference. I did not expect him to be what seemed like the far better striker. Obviously, you take somebody's legs out early in a fight, it's pretty hard to tell what's going to happen after that. But Alessandro Costa won this fight through its entirety. The entirety of this fight was on him. He won the first round and he won the second round up until the finish. So Alessandro Costa might be the real deal. He is training at that Lobo gym. He's with Diego Lopes. He's starting to look like Diego. You know how somebody buys a dog and then all of a sudden they start to look like their dog? That's what we got going on here with Alessandro Costa and Diego Lopes. The haircuts are the same. He's starting to look like Diego Lopes. But he is the real deal. And I'm curious to see what his matchup is next, because while Kevin Borjas isn't the greatest fighter of all time, we know he's an absolute dog and we knew he was a good striker. The striking almost wasn't there, and there's only so much dog you can have in you when your legs are just getting devastated out from underneath you. Then we had a surprisingly early fight. We had Bonfim, Ismael Bonfim, the second fight of the night. He is a duo, right? He's the one half of the Bonfim brothers that at one point the UFC was pushing the absolute hell out of. They did both lose, so maybe the UFC's backpedaling a bit or they want to build them up. I'm not sure. But we do have Ismael Bonfim in the second fight of the night, and he basically beat Vinc Pichel bell to bell. And he was supposed to. He was a minus 500 favorite. He was supposed to beat up a 41-year-old man, and that's exactly what he did. To Vinc Pichel's credit, he's insanely tough. He's not a guy you're just going to get out of there. He's not a guy you're going to hit a few times and knock him out. He's not Paul Craig. He's insanely tough. But he looked maybe not quite 41, but he certainly looked a little older, a little slower, and he wasn't the better fighter. But the biggest takeaway for me here was that Ismael Bonfim can fight a controlled fight. He did start off early headhunting. He absolutely early would land a jab and then just try to throw a baseball. Just over the top, throw a baseball at Vinc Pichel's head. Once he realized, all right, I'm not going to knock this guy out. I'm certainly not going to do it early. Then he was a little more patient. He was going to the body. He was hurting Vinc in the body. And all of a sudden, we have a guy that we knew always had the skills. He's a high-level boxer, high-level BJJ guy. We knew the skills were there. The problem is he comes out guns blazing, trying to finish fights, and he gets sloppy doing that. But once he slowed down a bit, once he accepted the fact that he probably wasn't going to knock out Vinc Pichel early, all of a sudden we got to see his actual skill sets and his patience. We got to see his control. And he looked spectacular. He was supposed to. He's a minus 500 favorite fighting a 41-year-old man, but he looked absolutely spectacular. I think Ismael Bonfim could be the real deal, and I want to see more of the controlled fights out of him. Less chaos, more control. He was still dangerous. He was still ripping the body, but he wasn't reckless. And I think that's what, to me, made him look so good in this fight. Then we had what might be the most exciting prospect in the UFC right now. We have Mauricio Ruffy. Mauricio Ruffy absolutely sparked Jamie Mullarkey. And it wasn't just like a one punch like Conor McGregor when he knocked out Jose Aldo that many years ago. It wasn't just, ooh, one punch got it done. He absolutely decimated Jamie Mullarkey from the first bell to the last bell. And he did it spectacularly. He managed range. All the comparisons are to Conor McGregor. He fights like Conor. He's got that wide stance. His hands are wide. His legs are wide. He bounces in and out. He's lightning fast. And he does look similar to him, except he hits way harder because he's bigger. And he has some of the most interesting takedowns I have ever seen. If you did not watch this fight, I recommend you go find highlights on Twitter. Dana White tweeted his own little highlight of Mauricio Ruffy. I would put it in here, but every time I do that, the UFC flags it. But Mauricio Ruffy did what looked like a scissor takedown. He was standing vertical, threw a punch, turned his hips, launched his body horizontally, and tried to scissor his way into a takedown. And guess what? He got it. He sat Jamie Mullarkey down on his butt, but then Jamie got back up, and it wasn't officially credited as a takedown. But it was wild. It was absolutely insane that he attempted it. It was insane that he almost got it. It was a spectacular attempt. And that just tells you how comfortable he was in that fight. He was dominating the striking, doing whatever he wanted to do with pinpoint accuracy, solid power, and insane speed. So then he just took wild chances with these ridiculous takedowns. He ultimately finished Jamie Mullarkey. But to Jamie Mullarkey's credit, we know he's chinny. He knows he's chinny. And he was getting pieced up at range. And then he made the conscious decision, I can't fight at range. So he started closing the distance. He started charging forward, trying to make it an ugly fight. And even that didn't matter. Mauricio Ruffy did not care. He did not let it get ugly. He was still cleaner. He was stepping off. He was landing. Mauricio Ruffy is honestly one of the more exciting prospects that we have. His striking was spectacular. Obviously, all we saw was basically striking and a scissor attempt against the guy that we know can be chinny. So we don't know what it looks like in the third round. We don't know what it looks like if he's taken down. We don't know any of that stuff. But what I do know is what I saw was absolutely spectacular, and I'm looking forward to his next fight. Then we had a very close decision. A very close decision that could have absolutely gone either way. We had Drakkar Klose and Joaquim Silva. Drakkar Klose did not look like the 2-1 favorite that he should have been. He had some success with the striking. He would move forward. He was the cleaner striker. But he was not the more powerful striker. Because I'll tell you right now, when it comes to who was closer to finishing this fight, it was Joaquim Silva all day. He had Drakkar Klose wobbled on his feet doing the chicken dance. He had Drakkar Klose in a full-blown guillotine. He was in the air. And it was spectacular because Drakkar Klose was standing, facing forward. And then he had Joaquim Silva around his neck on top of him. And if he went forward and put Joaquim on his back, it would have just made the guillotine tighter. So what did he do? He launched himself backwards as if he was doing a backflip, and he slammed Joaquim Silva's face directly into the canvas. The fact that Joaquim Silva was not knocked out from that is wild. It was the inertia of two human beings all onto his face, and it didn't knock him out. That made no sense whatsoever. Awesome move by Drakkar. Awesome way out of it. When somebody has your back, that's a technique, right? You dip your head, you do a forward roll, you slam their face into the mat. I've never seen somebody do it backwards in a guillotine, but it was a great idea by Drakkar. Either way, Drakkar was the cleaner striker, not the more dangerous striker. His wrestling was atrocious. I think he was 0 for 7 on takedown attempts in this fight. And they weren't clean doubles. He didn't shoot takedowns. He worked against the cage. And I think that's what's happening in this sport. Very few people, we're going to talk about Myktybek Oralby next, but very few people are shooting real takedowns. Everybody wants to be comfortable holding something in their hands and then working a trip or a body lock or trying to get takedowns against the cage. What I don't understand is why. I get there's some comfort to having something in your hands, but the reality is everybody can train takedown defense against the cage. It is very hard to take people down against the cage. People are training takedown defense in the clinch. Not enough people are training takedown defense or frankly using takedowns from distance. Jordan Burroughs style double legs up the middle. Because if Drakkar Klose stopped trying the stupid clinch takedowns and the cage takedowns, he would have had far more success. You're against the cage. They literally, all of these gyms that have no offensive takedowns whatsoever are training the hell out of cage takedown defense. It is much harder to take somebody down against a cage than it is in the middle of the mat. Drakkar Klose was a state champion wrestler. There is no cage on a wrestling mat. He has taken down, I'm assuming, hundreds, if not thousands of people in the middle of a mat. Stop pushing people against the cage. That just gives them vertical presence. That gives them a support system. Don't do that. Shoot out in the open. He didn't do it. He did win this fight. It was an insanely close decision. If it went the other way, I don't think anybody would have complained. And frankly, it was kind of shocking there wasn't a bit of a homer decision. I do think this was the correct decision. Drakkar Klose won the minutes, where Joaquim Silva won a few key seconds, but Drakkar Klose overall won more of the fight, so I'm totally fine with the decision. But I am surprised that in Brazil, they didn't give it to the Brazilian, let alone a big underdog that had some success. Then we had a caveman. The caveman from the Geico insurance commercials popped out of the television, got into that octagon, and wrestled his one fewer chromosome ass off. But the key to this fight was actually his striking. Because I'll tell you right now, this gentleman in front of us, Myktybek Oralby, is a nasty wrestler. But the wrestling was almost his undoing in this fight. It was the striking that was going to lead him to the promised land. He outstruck the hell out of Elves Brener. He had Elves Brener very hurt. He had Elves Brener rocked. He was destroying Elves Brener in the striking. It wasn't even close. He was landing with intent. Elves' head was snapping back. Elves Brener was losing the striking match. And we know that Elves is a jiu-jitsu black belt. But what did he just do? He just knocked out two of the better strikers in the UFC in a row. We did not expect Oralby to be the better striker, and he was the much better striker, and he should have stuck with the striking, because the problem was he started to go to the wrestling, and he got plenty of takedowns. The problem was anytime he ended up in some weird scramble, either Elves Brener has the best hips in the world, or Oralby can't jiu-jitsu scramble to save his life, because there was so many reversals, so many switchbacks. Elves Brener got a few takedowns. It was crazy how often somebody as dominant of a wrestler like Oralby was getting flipped and reversed onto his back. It made no sense. To get swept as many times as he got swept makes no sense. Oralby is a phenomenal wrestler that was lowering his level, shooting shots, changing directions, doing all of the things correct. And then all of a sudden, he's in mount, Elves Brener pops his hips out, and Elves Brener's on top. Those exchanges did not make sense to me. I have wrestled pretty much the entirety of my life. And it is not very often that you see a dominant wrestler get the takedowns, be that clean, and then just instantly get reversed constantly. That's not very often. That was surprising. So either, and this is a sincere statement, either Elves Brener has insane jiu-jitsu hips, which he might, or Orobai needs to do something about that control. Either way, Orobai won that fight clean. There was a point taken away instantly. There was no warning. There was no warning. Orobai held the cage, was still taken down. So holding the cage did not prevent him from being taken down. He held the cage, was taken down, and the referee just held up a point, like he was pointing to God. Just held up one, take it. And the commentators were like, I don't know what this is going to do to the score. This is going to get interesting. Because the second round, all of a sudden, Elves Brener ends up in full mount at the end of the round. Luckily, it ended up being correct. Orobai won that fight. They gave him the fight even with the point. I do have a problem with that point deduction. I have no problem with deducting points for fouls. But that foul did not affect anything. He grabbed the cage. He was still taken down. It didn't affect anything. He still ended up taken down. Now, if he grabbed the cage and it prevented a takedown and he stayed on his feet, take the point. Take the point, because who knows what would have happened from that point on. But he was still taken down. To just willy-nilly throw a point up was crazy. That was some new referee none of us have ever seen before. Luckily, it didn't alter the outcome of the fight. The right guy won. And it was a 30-27. And then they took a point, so it was a 29-27 across the board. But that was a little sketchy and had me a little worried. But that was the only blatant referee mess up on the night. Then we had the youngest female on the roster. Ismael Lucindo is the youngest female fighter on the UFC roster. And she looked good. They also said it was the biggest age discrepancy between two female fighters ever in a fight in the UFC. And it was 16 years age difference between the two of them. And it was not the most exciting fight we've ever seen, but it was a good enough fight. Ismael Lucindo looked like she had Karolina Kowalkiewicz in trouble a few times. But she did a great job of dialing it back. When she thought she had Karolina hurt and thought she could finish her, she was throwing combinations moving forward. When she realized, okay, she still has her wits about her, she would pull off a little bit, work some cage control, try to get a takedown, and she would work from there. She did get 2 takedowns. We had the over 1.5, so that ended up hitting. But Ismael Lucindo is good. She is still very young. She just beat a crafty veteran who was on a 4-fight win streak. I'm not ready to roll it all out, call her Carini Silva just yet. But Ismael Lucindo looked good, made adjustments, wasn't out fight IQ'd, didn't make any giant mistakes in there. So good for Ismael Lucindo. She halted what looked like a potential second title run for Karolina Kowalkiewicz. But Ismael Lucindo, I'm curious to see what they do with her next. There's a whole bunch of matchups that they can make for her. They said she's the youngest female on the roster, but there is a whole slew of these young, up-and-coming Brazilian women fighters that are just slowly beating the hell out of everybody, like quietly behind the scenes. So I am curious to see what her next matchup is. She looked pretty good. She beat a vet, and I don't know if they're going to immediately give her some tough competition or if they'll slowly move her up the ranks. Then we had one of the nastiest stoppages I have seen. We had Joanderson Brito taking on Jack Shore in the featured prelim. What you're looking at on the left is Joanderson Brito landing devastating leg kicks. Devastating leg kicks. That dude would open his hips up. He would plant his left leg, open his hips up, and slam his right shin into Jack Shore's shin. Just slam into it as if he was kicking a heavy bag. And that's how you train, right? You kick it as hard as you can, as fast as you can. You open your hips up, wham. You ever see the movie Kickboxer where Tung Po is kicking the beam and the dust is falling from the ceiling like it's going to collapse? That is how hard Joanderson Brito was kicking Jack Shore's shin. It swelled up, and then he eventually kicked it so hard it burst, and blood was gushing out of it. What you're looking at in this second picture is a thumb next to the cut. Maybe a half a second later, that thumb was inside of the shin, digging around. That doctor could not wait to fish around. I think the commentator said it was like he was looking for a bullet. His finger was in that hole, and he was just fishing around, swimming around in there, seeing what was going on. I assume he was checking to see if he could feel the bone and if it was broken, but either way, it was gruesome. I have never seen, they cited sometimes this has happened before. I can't remember a time where I have seen a shin just like wide open explode from devastating leg kicks. This didn't explode on the straight bone part where like it's just skin and then immediately your bone. If you feel your shin right now, if I'm feeling my right leg a little bit to the left, it's just straight up bone. There's a good chunk where it's just bone and skin. This is not where that opened up. It's the meat of it just opened up, swelling, just oozing. It was absolutely nasty, disgusting. Let's stop talking about that and let's talk about how freaking good Joanderson Brito is. I said he's one of the most dangerous guys in this division. At 145 pounds, this guy is insanely dangerous. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he doesn't respect anybody. He doesn't respect anybody. He could give a shit. He doesn't care. He will come forward and he will try to punch your lights out. He will come forward. He will kick you as hard as he can. If it leaves him open for takedowns, he doesn't care. He'll shoot his own takedown. He doesn't respect anybody's power. He doesn't respect anybody's timing. He doesn't care. The pace of this fight was incredible. We didn't get to a full 3 rounds because of the stoppage, but Joanderson Brito for the first round and a good chunk of the second round was all gas, no brakes, moving forward, landing whatever he wanted to, never looked like he was going to slow down. Joanderson Brito is dangerous. This guy is scary. He ended up being some of the greatest value on this card. I got him at minus 164, and I got him on Thursday. It's not as if I got him at minus 164 a month ago. He continues to be underestimated, and that might be the very last time that there's a 1 in front of his number there because this guy is nasty. It's hard to say Jack Shore if he's good, if he's bad. He didn't get a chance to get anything going. His legs were kicked out from underneath him almost immediately. He couldn't get any grappling going. He didn't really let his hands go, and that's just because Joanderson Brito was in his face, moving forward, making stuff happen. What I will say is Jack Shore's leg was a bloody, disgusting, swollen, gushing mess. He was walking on it. He was moving forward. You know, the ref is who stopped it, or the doctor is who stopped it, not him. He wasn't limping. He wasn't acting soft about it. I imagine he would have continued the fight, but luckily for him, they didn't let him. And ultimately, they said because they didn't know if that bone was fractured and if it was compromised. And that makes sense. I mean, it was getting blasted. Either way, Joanderson Brito is the real deal. That dude is terrifying. And takes us to the main card opener. Kyle Brala was the second largest favorite on this card. He was minus 645, almost a 7-1 favorite. And he looked it. He lit up Paul Craig. I mean, Paul Craig absolutely stinks. This guy's not good. He's just not good. He was shooting. I'm emphasizing that. So you're going to say shooting to pull guard. He would shoot a shot. And as soon as there was any contact, boom, fall into my butt. Gotcha. And I know that is a technique that the nerds train, but it's absurd. How many times have you heard me say, this is supposed to be an organization filled with the greatest hand-to-hand combat athletes on planet Earth? That's what this is supposed to be. The UFC is supposed to be the greatest fighters on this planet right now. And we have people like Paul Craig shooting guard. Trying to pull it desperately. People like Paul Craig that box like this, like an old-timey movie. With chin up in the air, meh, see? With a stupid-ass Vince Pichel mustache. Fists up like this. That's how he stands. Head up in the air, fists all wide and stupid. Anything that touched him, his head would go flying back like he had the neck of a toddler. Paul Craig stinks. The guy's not good. We saw that. You shouldn't be at 85. I get it. He can make the weight, but his chin is just non-existent. It wasn't great at 205, but it was better. The chin is just, he was almost knocked out with like 17 jabs. Either way, he didn't even get an opportunity to grapple because he never learned how to wrestle. Imagine being that good at jiu-jitsu and having no clue how to get somebody to the ground. I have never understood that. I will never understand that. It is absolutely insane to me. If you're watching this and you have young children and you want your children to compete in some combat sports, some martial arts, do not let them do jiu-jitsu until they've done wrestling. Do it in that order. Start with wrestling, then go to jiu-jitsu. Otherwise, you'll end up like a weird guard-pulling nerd that doesn't have square hips, that doesn't have powerful hips, that can't win scrambles, that can't control where a fight or a grappling match goes. And now they're relying on guard pulls or other people to shoot on them. Wrestle first, then do jiu-jitsu so you don't end up like Paul Craig in this picture. It was pathetic. What I will say is Caio Borralho outstruck him. Didn't even engage in the striking. I'm going to give him a compliment, and then I'm going to question a few things. The compliment is at one point, Caio Borralho had Paul Craig dropped, landed a nice, I think it was a straight right, and then a beautiful knee up the middle, and Paul Craig was 90%, like just collapsed, whatever. And Caio engaged for a half a second and was going to hit him while Paul Craig was on the ground, and he completely backed away because he knew the only way this guy wins this fight if he somehow catches me in some dumb shit on the ground. And to have that level of self-control throughout a fight with a slow pace is already great. But to have that level of self-control in the middle of an exchange where you have this guy almost finished, and you know for a fact if I pounce on him and I land a few more shots, they're going to end this, and still have the self-control to back away, that is incredible. Caio Borralho's gym is the nerds. What are they? The fight nerds or something? And it makes sense. The fight IQ that he showed right there was absolutely spectacular. Now here's for the question. I don't know how good his striking actually is. Paul Craig's chin sucks. Paul Craig's striking sucks. Anybody could look good against him striking. But Caio's head was up as well. His chin is up as well, and his hands were low to the point where Jacob's like, I think there's something wrong with his shoulder because his hands were here. You can't really see. His hands were here. They weren't here. He wasn't here. His hands were here. Super low. And at one point, Paul Craig faked the knee, and Caio Borralho took his hand, his lead hand, and pushed it down like this to like push the knee down. Way overreacted, just leaving anybody with any skills to whap him on that side. So I don't know what Caio Borralho's actual striking acumen is, but it was certainly good enough to beat this guy. And then we had a holy shit moment that turned into a I hope they don't screw this up moment. Michel Pereira dominated Ihor Pereira. This fight was, 8 seconds? Actually, let me see here. How long was this fight? They don't even have the time on the screen that I'm looking at. It was 54 seconds. Under 1 minute of the first round. In under 1 minute, he blasted Ihor. It dropped him. And then Michel Pereira turned his back to a man laying on the ground and did a full backflip where his knee landed on his chest and his shin crossed his face. And then from there, he got the finish. It was absolutely nuts. He did that. He did the backflip, landed on him, crushed his chest/face with his knee. It created a scramble. Ihor stood up. Michel grabbed the guillotine, and instead of sitting back with it, thankfully, pulling guard, doing all that, he stood up with it. He walked. He arched. Ihor tapped, and then when he was let go, just 100%. He somehow mustered up enough energy to tap, and then was 100% unconscious, fell back, and that was it. Where the controversy comes in is when he did that backflip, Michel Pereira's chin absolutely hit Ihor Pereira's face. So he technically kicked a grounded opponent. That is illegal almost everywhere. Outside of pride fighting in the mid-2000s, that is illegal. And they conferred for a while. The athletic commission, the commissioners, the referees, they were all just, and then Bruce Buffer's like, what is happening? What's the decision here? Ultimately, they still gave Michel Pereira the submission win. And I think that's good. I think that made sense because you didn't stop the action when it happened. If you stopped when it happened, stop, then fine. You saw what you thought was an illegal knee, and that was it. They did not stop the action when it happened. And obviously, we're only talking about another 20 seconds. But there was a full scramble and then the submission. I think what they ultimately, I don't speak Portuguese and there was no audio, but I think they ultimately decided the knee didn't affect this. The knee isn't what finished this fight. That submission is. And the submission didn't even immediately follow the knee. The scramble is what created the submission. I think that's ultimately what they landed on. But I saw that replay, and to me, 99% of the pressure of the knee, all of that was right here on the chest, and then the shin came down a little bit and grazed. So to me, it wasn't even that big of a deal. Watching it in full motion when it happened, we're like, holy shit, that's illegal. And then when they slowed down, you got 30 more angles. Then you could see, okay, it wasn't that bad. But either way, Michel Pereira at 185 pounds is a savage beast. This guy moved up from 170, somehow more powerful, somehow faster, somehow more athletic, somehow more dangerous. It is insane how good he has looked. And he hasn't fought the highest level of competition in his first 3 fights at 185 pounds. He fought 3 guys that get finished, that can be chinny, but he smoked every single one of them. Smoked them, wasn't even remotely close. None of those fights were remotely close. He has smoked all of them. And I'm looking forward to see what the hell Michel Pereira has in store for us next. He's only 30 years old. And this is him midair doing that flip. Michel Pereira is awesome, and I'm looking forward to more of him. And then we had the biggest upset of the night. One of the biggest upsets on a main card this year. It might literally be the biggest upset on a main card this year. Let me know if I'm wrong or if I'm missing one. We've had a lot of fights already this year, but we had Vitor Petrino getting submitted by Anthony Smith. And Anthony Smith caught a lot of shit this week because a lot of people counted him out, me included. And what I will say, there are outside influences into this. You know how when there's a murder trial and it's like a really popular one and there's a lot of media about it, they sequester the jury. They take the jury and they make them stay in a hotel. No phones, no news, no television, nothing. You cannot be influenced by anything from the outside world. I needed that when breaking down this fight because the reality is when I first looked at the matchup, my gut was like, Anthony Smith is still tough as hell and Vitor Petrino is a physical beast, but his skills aren't there just yet. And I talked about it in the breakdowns. We talked about the fact that he literally would look at his coaches in the middle of a fight. Hey, what should I do now, coach? Oh, this arm goes here. Literally looking at them, being coached through moves. And while that's a good thing, he's a very coachable guy. It's also like you're kind of at a high level here to be still learning on the fly. But he is a physical beast. He's got power in his hands. He can wrestle. He can do all of those things. And my thing was, Anthony Smith is insanely tough. His teeth were knocked out of his mouth fighting Glover. He put him back in. He's not a guy you get out of there quickly. But there was a video on YouTube that I would just see constantly. I'd never click on it, so it would just continue to throw up in my feed. And it was like the most washed fighters ever. And the thumbnail is just Anthony Smith. And then that just like burns into your brain. I should have been sequestered. These outside influences, I would have picked Vitor Petrino no matter what. I'm not inferring that if I didn't see that, I was going to. No. But I would have avoided him. Because my gut was like, man, Vitor Petrino, like, there's still a lot to learn. But then it's like, in my head, it's like, yeah, Anthony Smith's washed. That's right. He is washed. He was just knocked out by Khalil Roundtree. He should have lost 4 in a row. I don't think he beat Ryan Spann either. And I wish I kept that energy, but it is what it is. It was the only bet I lost. I hit every other bet that was put on that board. It was the only bet that I lost. So it's fine. I'll take it. I'm up 31% return on investment on this card, up 1.5 units on this card. I'll take it. Luckily, I wasn't overly exposed to Vitor Petrino. But if we're talking about Vitor Petrino, I don't think this takes away a lot from him. All we really saw was Anthony Smith came out, landed some devastating leg kicks. Vitor did the right thing and said, I should probably wrestle now. Shot a takedown and got guillotined. That's all that happened. This was a very quick fight. That is all that we saw. This fight ended at 2 minutes of the first round. So all we really got to see was a bit of feeling out. Nobody committed to anything. Then as Vitor would close in, Anthony Smith was bang, leg kick, bang, leg kick, bang, leg kick. Vitor Petrino didn't like it. It was hurting him. So he worked Anthony against the cage. And then when he dropped to the legs for a takedown, Anthony snatched up a guillotine. 9 out of 10 times, jumping guillotine is the dumbest decision you can make. This time it happened to be an excellent decision, and it worked. So good for Anthony Smith. The guy was, at no point was he losing this fight. So this wasn't a, wow, Anthony Smith is so tough. This was quite literally a, there's levels to this. I alluded to it earlier, but Anthony Smith caught a lot of shit this week. He said the fans are stupid. All the fans counted him out. As an analyst, he pointed out some holes in Michel Pereira's game, and everybody was like, you suck, you're a loser, you're about to get finished, you blah, 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 blah. And he's like, yeah, fans are idiots. What are you going to do? There's levels to this, and I'm on a different level than Vitor Pereira. Turns out he was right. He was right. So good for Anthony Smith. Got a very definitive win over a very good prospect. I don't think this takes too much stock out of Vitor Petrino. Certainly, he's not in line for a title shot, and there's a lot of things to work on, but he needed that. Better now than when he ends up in a main event title fight and gets toasted there. Then we had the co-main event where Jose Aldo just turned back the clock. Jose Aldo looked awesome. He looked awesome. My biggest concern going into this fight was not Jose's skill set. He was going to be the better fighter no matter what. My big concern is he's old. He is old. He didn't look old. He did not look old in this fight. I think two things happened. One, I do think Jonathan Martinez gave Jose Aldo a little too much respect. He gave him way too much respect. He let Jose work. He let Jose move forward. He gave Jose way too much respect. But two, Jose was able to turn this into his fight. He was able to just make this a boxing match. He stayed in his face. He threw combinations to the body, and he was able to make it a boxing match. Jose Aldo looked great. He looked absolutely great. I do think he beat a starstruck kid. I think that's what this was. I think Jonathan Martinez was literally starstruck I cannot believe I'm fighting Jose Aldo. I cannot believe I'm in a co-main event of a pay-per-view. I cannot believe I'm in Brazil. I think it was all of those things because Jonathan Martinez did not look like himself. At least not as the fight got going. Early he did. Early couple leg kicks, bang, 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 bang. And then Jose started to take over. I think Jonathan Martinez was like, oh my God, I'm fighting Jose Aldo. And he started to take over. But Jose Aldo looked fantastic. At his age, and I've said this a million times, he is not the 36 years old or 37-year-old that he is listed at. He is not. He's absolutely 40 or older, and he still looked fantastic. My only gripe in this fight is a bet that I had here was Jose Aldo wins inside the distance, decision, no action. All that bet means is if Jose Aldo finished Jonathan Martinez, I would get paid. If it goes to a decision, win, lose, draw, doesn't matter. If it goes to a decision, I get a refund. It went to a decision, I got a refund. So essentially that bet never happened. But in the third round, with like a minute and a half left, he had Jonathan Martinez 85% knocked out on the feet. 85% knocked out on the feet. And then he shot a takedown. He took Jonathan Martinez to the ground. And on the ground, he just kind of tried to pass guard a little bit. Ooh, I'm going to threaten a head and arm. And that was it. And we were all thinking it. And then Paul Felder said it. That felt like a mercy takedown. Like he just almost didn't want to hurt this kid. Didn't want to beat his ass. Didn't want to finish him like that. So he just shot a takedown to shoot a takedown. And I'm glad he won. I was happy. I was rooting for him. Good for him. I was never going to bet against him. I bet on him. And that's what annoys me. He could have finished. 100% positive he could have finished Jonathan Martinez if he doesn't shoot that takedown. But he did shoot that takedown. It is what it is. I expected him to say in the post-fight interview that he was officially retired. He got a big win. He's the king of Rio. The event was in Rio. I expected a full retirement. We didn't get that. He said, I'm going to sit with Dana White, Sean Shelby. We'll see what happens. Because there are other rumors that were circulating is that he wants to fight on the Jake Paul Mike Tyson card. He wants to box on that card. That's here in Dallas. I will be going to that. And so I expected him to retire so he could do that. He had no fights left on his, that was it. It was just this fight. He has no obligation to the UFC. He's free and clear, at least from what I know. And he still said, well, I got to talk to them and we'll see what happens. What Jose Aldo should be doing is getting the big money fights. This was a great fight. I mean, this was at home. It was a co-main event at a Rio pay-per-view. But he fought a relatively, I don't want to say unknown in a disrespectful way to Jonathan Martinez. But Jonathan Martinez isn't a household name, right? He's not the caliber of a guy that would headline a fight night, at least. Jose Aldo should be fighting those guys, the names. He's a legend in this sport. He is a name himself. Either give him a title shot or let him fight a name. Jose Aldo versus Henry Cejudo. Do that fight. Henry's coming off 2 losses in a row, essentially. Do that fight. I'll watch that. Make that a pay-per-view co-main event. Make that a fight night main event. Do Henry Cejudo, Jose Aldo. Couple of former titles title holders, couple of former legends, couple of the best in their divisions ever. Let them fight. Then we had the main event of the evening. What Jacob thought was happening, what I thought was happening, what Casey thought was happening, what Bo thought was happening, the people I was watching these fights with were all a little bit different. Everybody had different reads on this fight in the moment. I thought this was Pantoja 4-1. And there's somewhat of an argument, 5-0. In my mind, watching the fights, just live, just sitting there watching the fights, not seeing any stats, just watching the fights, it felt like Pantoja was winning every round. Steve Erceg was throwing nothing offensively. He would wait, he would wait, he would wait, he would wait. Pantoja would throw something and then he'd be like, bah, 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 bah. He would wait, he would wait. And it's not counter-striking. Counter-striking is you're parrying, you're dipping, boom, you're dipping, boom. No, he would get a hit and then he would throw. To the point where I was pointing it out. I said, he's doing nothing, 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 nothing. He got hit, now he threw. And that's what he was doing. He was also getting ragdolled. He was getting taken down at will. And this is supposed to be a national wrestling champion. Steve Erceg is a national wrestling champion, a gold medalist, or whatever they called it. And he got ragdolled. He had quite literally zero wrestling success. I do think he had one single takedown where he was almost immediately reversed. That's a national wrestling champion? That's an Australian national wrestling champion? Where you have Alexandre Pantoja out wrestling the shit out of you? Alexandre Pantoja's never wrestled a day in his life. He's obviously learned how to wrestle through martial arts, but he's not a wrestler. And he ragdolled him. I think Steve Erceg was a little too much too soon. I don't think he was ready for this fight. He certainly brought the fight. The fifth round, he blew it. 2 judges gave him 2 rounds. And that 5th round, he looked like he was controlling things. He looked like he was doing well. Then he shot a takedown. The national wrestling champion shot a takedown with like a minute and a half left. And he got stuffed, out-scrambled, put on his back, and he spent the rest of the fight on his back like this. And he clearly lost that round because of it. If he stayed striking, or if he wasn't a hollow national champion wrestler, he might have won that fight. I personally do not think he would have won the fight with the 5th round. But 2 judges do. 2 judges gave him 2 rounds. And then if you add the 5th, that's 3. I'm not Goodwill Hunting, but 2 + 1 is 3. So Steve Erceg was this close to being the champion. I am so glad that didn't happen because I thought Pantoja won. That dude just eats shots. You can hit Pantoja with whatever you want, and he just continues moving forward. And he will grab you, and he will toss you to the ground. He is strong, he's a bully, and he does that really, really well. I'm glad Pantoja won. He deserved to get that win. It would have been a screw job if he didn't. But Pantoja now, 3 title defenses. Good for him. And I don't know off the top of my head, but he can't be too far off from the most amount of title defenses at this weight class. We haven't exactly had multiple generations of this weight class. It's a newer weight class. He's defended it 3 times. All of a sudden, Pantoja might be one of the best to do it at 125 pounds. And that might be a conversation that we're having in a little bit. But Alexandre Pantoja came forward, wrestled his ass off, won this fight. Guys, don't forget, we will send you $50. Anybody who goes to WeWantPicks.com/bets, uses our link, makes an account, gets $50. We have affiliate marketing deals with multiple books. You use the link, you sign up, you make a deposit. They pay me. I slice off some of that money and I give it right back to you. It's that simple. You got to use the link, you make a deposit, and we'll give you $50. Cash App, PayPal, Venmo. Real money from us to you. You can then use that money to become a premium member. Premium membership will give you access to all of our picks, all of our bets, all of our tools, the DraftKings fantasy, everything you could ever want or need. One of those tools is the line movement tracker, the opening odds, the current odds, the win probability, and the line movement for every fighter on every card. You're also going to get the detailed data, metrics, and analytics, 38 columns of information that you can use to find prop bets and other spots. And you're going to get far more than just me. I was very profitable on the night. I had a very good night, but you're going to get more than just me. You're going to get Jacob's picks and bets, Artem's picks and bets. Artem breaks down far more than just UFC. He's going to give you PFL, LFA, all those promotions as well. And we do have an artificial intelligence that is picking fights based solely off of data. It is doing so at an incredible accuracy. And now we are developing betting systems based off of that as well. Everything that I just mentioned and more is available right now at WeWantPicks.com. Just click Become a Member. It is only $10 for an entire month.